Hello, welcome to EXPAT News. My name is Sean Sardo. I am an American in JInjiang, Fujian. Today is February 6, 2020. It's currently around 12:20 in the afternoon. I just want to go over some updates and kind of tell you what my situation and what it looks like here, what I'm seeing from inside China. Once again, Fujian province is pretty far from the epicenter of Wuhan. But we're still seeing, quite, I would say, drastic measures to deal with to contain the virus and spread while people are working on getting treatments. Well, people are working on sort of making treatments for the virus. And here, my complex is currently under lockdown. In China, mostly what you see these days are, apartment complex or projects, really. Where communities are almost like a village. It's almost like little villages or towns. Each complex can house thousands of people. So my complex is under lockdown, which means out of all the exits, all the exits have been secured except one where you have exit and entry. At that exit and entry, you have to get your temperature checked, and they use the handheld temperature checkers that don't touch your forehead, and they're looking for, basically, from what I understand, a 37 degree, give or take one or two, is considered a normal temperature. And that occurred to me yesterday. Now, yesterday I went out to actually get some more water. I have a water dispenser here, and I usually keep 2 5-gallon jugs of water on hand, and I actually was down to one, so I went down to refill that, and I found that they weren't allowing me to actually leave the complex at all. It was completely under lockdown, and not knowing Chinese, or not being fluent in Chinese to the extent that I can understand what's being told to me 100%. I wasn't able to leave, and so I was unsure what that meant at the time. Upon further investigation, I was being told that you could only leave every 2 days. But I went back down later on in the day to see if I could go out and get the water, and they did allow me to pass through. So for whatever reason, it seemed to have just been there was a temporary, maybe I got there when they were setting up or something like that, and they hadn't quite yet established how they're the protocol for dealing with passage. Now, that being said, I was then told that, it would be every 2 days. Every 2 days you're allowed to go out and get groceries. There's a supermarket close by within walking distance here. The supermarket is located over a wet market, so it's not really the ideal sort of location for it. Since the wet markets tend to be is where the virus outbreak originated from, and it's understandable why it did. And that market is still open, so I can walk down there and get groceries. And I went down there yesterday, and things seem to be still pretty decently stocked, but there is some signs of resources depleting. Though the wet market was quite abundant, to be honest with you. The wet market was quite abundant, and perhaps that is because a lot of the produce is being gardened not very far away, or cultivated not very far away. Chinese will garden anything. Let's just put this. I wanted to say this for the longest time, and I don't see other expats talking about this, or other foreigners. Like, Chinese garden the heck out of everything, man. There'll be a little patch of dirt somewhere, and you'll walk by. The minute they upturn a little bit of dirt for like landscaping, or maybe they're knocking a building down and they're going to put a new building in, if they see that little bit of dirt there with they'll just throw in crops. There'll be rows of lettuce in there the next day, and they'll just garden it. They garden everything here, and so you see you'll see gardens in the strangest places, just like on the side of a road, like in a construction site, there'll be a garden. There's just gardens everywhere. So I, when I go for my walk, and I'm still allowed to go for that walk, there's Chinese people with gardens all strewn along, you know, in the woods, in the hills, in the wilds. There's all kinds of gardens located around here, so I'm assuming a lot of that produce is just coming from there. You know, that being said, they don't necessarily use the best kinds of insecticides, and they don't use the best kinds of sort of fertilizers to cultivate their produce. So you're taking a risk on that too. Once again, this is all things I hope that China begins to address in the future, or in the immediate, sooner rather than later. So yeah, the wet market is still quite abundant and still operational. So far, so my community is in this sort of lockdown. So I was told 2 days, but now one of my administrators at the school that I work at, they have checked in on me, and they have informed me that no, you can leave whenever you want. You just have to make sure you go to this one area and get checked for your temperature and tell them where you have been, and so on and so forth. Now, one of the big concerns of mine as things are developing in terms of travel restrictions and my circumstances, my ability to move freely, is my visa. And every foreigner who's worked in China knows the severity of not working here on a visa, or what sort of predicament or what sort of consequences that can bring. China is very severe on their immigration policies for the most part, and this is one of the things that that we've seen not only people from China exploit in America, and this is what a lot of the narrative. This is something that America is exploited for, and whereas China is very strict about, and so it creates that imbalance that somebody can take advantage of. China is very severe in their immigration policies. If you're not here on a visa, you can risk being imprisoned, fined, and deported without the ability to ever return again, with a black mark on your passport. And there's plenty of cases, plenty of people will attest to that. There's plenty of people who will say that's exactly what's happened to them, and what will happen to you. So it's something to be very concerned about, and I've always been very sort of adamant, or very sort of I've always been sort of very aggressive about making sure those things are in order. Are very clinical about making sure that those that criteria is satisfied for me being here. And the problem here is that this month my visa will expire at the end of the month, so it's created this whole new sort of unknown, this whole sort of arena of uncertainty of how that will proceed, if it will proceed, and can it be accomplished under these circumstances. Now seeing things like Hong Kong, which was one of the only sort of routes out of China at this point. You have Hong Kong, Shanghai, and Beijing, and Hong Kong was one of the areas, one of the airports, one of the hubs that we were still sort of probably was one of the easier routes to leave China if you were a foreigner. And now I'm seeing that they have changed their restrictions to 14 days of quarantine. I'm not seeing in any of the literature if that is that for people in transit also. And by what I mean people in transit is that if you have a flight that has a connection in Hong Kong, are you still in it? You go through China. Does that still mean they take you into 14 days of quarantine, or does it mean you miss your connecting flight? So it's kind of concerning, and you don't see it a lot. A lot of the news reports, they don't get into that detail, and it's a very important detail. I think is being left out, that they're not distinguishing, like, okay, this is if you have Of course, if you can get a direct flight, that's the most ideal. But I think for the most part, there's very few, if any, direct flights out of any of the international airports in China now. So the best you could do is to make those connecting flights, and what it seems like could happen is you could go from Shanghai to Japan, and then get to Japan, and because they're quarantining anyone from the mainland, you're stuck in 14 days there, and then you have to. And then I don't know what the situation would be with your connecting flight at that point. Would it have been canceled? Can you get that reimbursed? Would you be buying a whole nother flight? You can find yourself in a really kind of desperate situation by not knowing that one kind of important piece of information. So yeah, Hong Kong is now quarantined for 14 days. So even so if you're thinking I'll go to Hong Kong and then I'll get a flight so I can get to Hong Kong, then I can get out of here, catch a flight. No, that's not really an option anymore unless you want to sit around for 14 days. There. So that's another concern, a growing concern. So that would mean something like, okay, well, what happens if I can't get my visa renewed? I can't get my visa renewed, and then I can't even leave the country. What happens to me? It doesn't invalidate my U.S. passport, but it just sort of jeopardizes your ability to. It jeopardizes your presence in China. It jeopardizes your ability to reside in China at that point. So I'm working with my administrator, the person who came and checked on me. Apparently they've initiated the process for the visa, and they're giving me all kinds of reassurances. And basically what I get from my community over here, my associates in China, they're all just kind of full of reassurances. And even though you're always kind of even though just kind of as a I think any sort of intelligent, sentient being is going to understand there's certain events that are going to be beyond the scope of what they know, and what they're capable to do about things, and you're always sort of trying to weigh those things. I'm getting that from the Chinese, but on my, in my American circumstances, in my immediate family over there, I kind of get a nonchalance, like, do what you want to do, whatever you want to do, kind of thing, and you're also understanding that there's certain things beyond their scope, that they are just kind of shrugging off, or saying, they have their confidences and they have their confidences, and you're trying to weigh them all on how that affects your decision-making process. So that's my situation here so far. I guess one other thing I wanted to some people were mentioning that places are closed. I've heard that information. And walking into the communities, I do see, most of the big businesses have closed down, and so any franchises or any corporate entities, they're all closed down for now. But a lot of the mom and pop stores are still open. Not a lot of them, a few of them, but like some very odd ones are still open. Like I saw a nail salon open the other day. I saw a coffee shop open the other day. And it's sort of very, very. I was just kind of questioning. There was a knick-knack shop, a gift shop open also, and I thought these people were. I thought it was just kind of odd to see them open. Also down in the area where the supermarket is, where kind of like the government for my town is, or the district is, and so you see a greater police presence down there at the complexes. Each of these complexes are going through the same sort of lockdown measures, but at some of the complexes down there's actual police. For the most part, the security here, I think, is the local security. The complex security down there, it seems to be the police. And I actually saw some people in hazmat suits, which made me wonder if there has been any sort of detection of the virus in residents there. What I'm also thinking is with a lot of this reporting here, you're seeing a lot of recoveries now. Some things I want to point out. This Medcram. If you really want to kind of get some information, I think that is really reliable about the nature of this virus from a clinical side. I would really suggest checking out this Medcram channel because he's doing a great job in sort of discussing the statistics, looking at what this virus really is, you know, and he's giving the information. I've also heard this from other outlets that this remdesivir is a drug that was used to try and fight Ebola, but it was found ineffective when used on patients. It was effective in the laboratories, but it was not effective when it was used on patients. But now they're finding that it's actually sort of a good treatment for this coronavirus. It's proving to have some sort of positive results when it's used. So this remdesivir is something to keep in mind when you're listening for drugs that are effective in treating the virus. But once again, they're just starting to get these results, so they're still looking they really need to test it, I guess, in sort of controlled experimentations where you have placebos and things like that to say it really is. It's not just the people, you know, sort of project or something else, you know, but something else that's actually doing it. So remdesivir is a possible treatment so far. That's showing some signs of results. And another one, which I think is really good news, is this chloroquine. He says has proven to be very effective. And chloroquine's been around since malaria. It's been around. It's a drug that's been used to treat malaria. So that would suggest that this perhaps is not as novel as a virus, or at least it's not as lethal. I mean, not that malaria isn't lethal, but we have drugs that are capable or already have been established as effective in fighting viruses that can also treat this one. Or it's not as unique as perhaps it's not as novel, not as unique as it's being presumed as. So there's some good signs coming out there. Just following this guy's channel. It's interesting. He also talks about how the virus actually works, and it's kind of funny because it kind of works like a cuckoo bird. It finds a cell, and it kind of goes in that cell and pushes out the means for that cell to reproduce, and then takes up residence there and just kind of reproduces through that, using that cell. And so for that reason, I'm kind of call it the cuckoo virus or something like that. So it's a great channel. It's a good channel. I would suggest that if you really want to kind of get a grasp of what's going on in terms of what's really going on in terms of the virus, you know. My feeling is that that's really good news. Is that chloroquine, and in terms of another thing I'm feeling, or my projection, is that like a lot of the diagnosis, you're hearing these great numbers of diagnosis. I think the tendency, though, is to diagnose everything as coronavirus, you know, and because they don't have the ability to get that, to have very accurate diagnosis right now. You know, they don't have all the test kits. They don't have the ability to know. They don't really have the data or the information to differentiate one from the other to a great degree, you know, or perhaps to, you know, really sort of verify it is indeed the same virus. So my feeling, or my presumption right now, is that there's probably a lot of misdiagnosis involved in those numbers also. And this is a time of year in China where there's this pervading chill, and everything is very sort of cold and rainy in a lot of regions, and it's not outright snowy. And then you have, on top of that, you have the air pollution factor factoring into that. You know, you have a cocktail of possibilities for respiratory disease. So a lot of that is kind of being diagnosed together, and they're still trying to isolate one thing from the other. I think that's a strong possibility in some of those figures right now. But anyway, that's my update for today. I'll keep you informed. Those are my thoughts for February 6th. I will keep you informed. Please click like and subscribe. I really appreciate that. And we'll talk to you later.